Yesterday is history. Tomorrow is a mystery, but today is a gift.
It is not our abilities that show what we truly are. It is our choices.
Hello and welcome to Jen Taylor Rerouting, where being rude is never acceptable, but sarcasm is welcome and swearing isn't always a bad option. Let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Jen Taylor Rerouting. Today, I'm super excited. I have Laura Aiello. Now, you're going to make this last name super complicated like I did. It's spelled A-I-E-L-L-O, pronounced like J-Lo, but Aiello. So that'll make sure nobody forgets you. Laura, how are you?
I'm doing great today.
Good. We have so much fun stuff to talk about. And like I always do with my interviews, we're going to kind of bounce all around and then we'll bring it. It always ties in. But one of the things I want people to know is that if you are someone as a child or as an adult who has gone through any kind of domestic violence, this is definitely a podcast you want to listen to. So we're going to start kind of at the beginning, Laura. You came from a very religious home.
Yeah.
I was Mormon LDS for 17 years, which isn't something that I talk about very often. You were raised Jehovah's Witness. I have an aunt that was Jehovah's Witness and her kids, so I saw that. My partner in life and in crime, Dane, he was raised very strict Catholic. And so I want to make it very clear that we're not picking on any specific religion. Mm-hmm. There are several religions that are very strict in nature, a lot of them in the exact same way. So mm-hmm. I can talk more, and can talk Catholic, you can talk Jehovah's Witness, and we're kind of just talking about basic structures within those religions. Uh-huh. When you're raised that way, let's talk about that, because I actually joined the church later as a teenager looking for family values, which they have. Right. But talk to me about being raised in a very strict religion.
So in some ways, it's super fantastic. You're very clear on expectations. You're very clear on beliefs. We had a very tight-knit family. Often in religions that are really strict like that, the religious community in and of itself is pretty tight-knit, so you really feel like you are part of something. Jehovah's Witnesses is kind of a challenging religion from the standpoint as a child that, you know, we don't celebrate holidays, birthdays, any of those things. And you're sort of taught that, you know, those things go against scriptural evidence. And so you sort of feel sorry for people that celebrate. People feel sorry for you for not celebrating. But overall, it's not a deprived childhood, but we had gifts and all of those things. But the thing of it is, Jen, is underlying all of that is this attitude that, and this knowledge, I guess, and it's not specifically said to you, but it's implied that should your thinking deviate, you will lose your family, your community, and all of those things because they don't support ideologies, that are in any way different. You're not even really supposed to question. So if you're questioning it, it's your lack of faith. It's not that they might be wrong.
So, heaven forbid anybody should be wrong.
Exactly. So, you know, it's very supportive and very loving, as you and I had talked about previously, you know, until it's not, until you suddenly think, you know what, something about this isn't right. And the problem is that what ends up happening, even if you're a strong person that has some differing ideas, you certainly don't want to let down your family. You don't want to let down your religious community, and you certainly don't want to let down God. So you tend to stuff all of those questions that you have, and it really messes with your decision making, quite honestly. And of course, in most strict religions, you know, sex before marriage is not acceptable, and neither is marrying outside the religion. So you're kind of left with this rather narrow scope of people that you could potentially marry, and people start getting married younger and younger. So you start feeling the pressure until you're like, man, if I'm not married by the time I'm like 21, I am an old maid. if I want to have a family and those things are important to me. So that's kind of what it's like. It's very loving, but it's also with this sort of overhanging, if you don't comply, if you don't play within the, rules, then you could potentially lose everything.
Everything. And I wasn't raised in it as a child. And so my desire to question wasn't that wasn't instilled at a young age. So I've always wanted to question everything. And I felt also like I wasn't lying by being a member of a strict religion. I was just not being all facets of myself.
Yeah.
So like you were talking about stuffing down, I mean, stuffing down the fact that you are a confident, strong woman who has ideas and views, or for me it was, well, what if I wanted to work outside the home? And well, that's okay, but it's not really okay. I mean, there was all this, I felt like I was constantly trying to navigate the friction that I was inevitably going to feel when anything came out of my mouth. And it's a tightrope act almost to navigate that. And like you said, you lose your community and your friends and your family and God. Yeah. So then there's the fear and the guilt and the fire and the brimstone and hell and damnation. And a lot of that comes in. And I personally never felt like God was somebody who would lead with, especially as a parent. Why would God lead with fear and anger? And like that goes against everything that I had read, but yet it's insidious. It's not like you're in a strict religion and you flip a switch.
Right.
Kind of snakes its way into your life, a little here and a little there, and you accept things a little here and a little there. And when you feel that friction of your personality, you feel guilt.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was a no sex before marriage. Most strict religions are. And I don't know details, like as far as the difference between being Jewish, being Mormon, being Catholic, being Jehovah's Witness, but like we didn't do coffee, no alcohol, no tattoos, no piercings. Mm-hmm. I'm like, if it doesn't show, who's going to know? I'll just put all that stuff where it doesn't show. But you're constantly feeling naughty and like you're going against the grain. And one of the big things though is sex before religion. So you're right. So you married at 19, correct?
Yes.
And I also married at 19. And my oldest daughter is 25, and I have a 19-year-old daughter and son, and I would kill them if they wanted to get married at this age. But yet for you and I, what was that like?
Yeah, it was, it's very funny because my parents actually got married. My mom was 17 and my dad was 20. And at that point in time when they got married, living in California, they both had to get permission to get married because men had to have permission before the age of 21, women before the age of 18. And they're still married, and they've been, they've had their ups and downs like anybody, but pretty much happily married. And so my desire to get married, let me back up. I met my husband at the age of, I was 12, he was 11. He had this crush on me. I hated him. I thought he was a jerk. And then his father was not one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and he divorced his mother. And so he was going through this rough time. And my family asked me to be nice to him because he was having such a rough time. He was 15. He was a year younger than I was. So I started being nice to him. And quite honestly, he was kind of a rebellious kid. Like he had, wasn't that involved in the religion, had, dabbled with marijuana and drinking and I don't know, typical teenage type stuff. So to me, he was like James Dean almost. So when you're a super straight arrow, somebody like that, you're like, this is actually kind of, it's like that bad boy thing you're sort of attracted to, which FYI, anybody that's listening out there, bad boys, fine for dating maybe for a while. Don't marry them. It's not, bad boys or bad husbands. So anyway, I just kind of thought I was falling in love with him. I was really just feeling the pressure of my future starting to loom over me, I think, and then combined with this sort of attraction to the bad boy thing. So the reason I got married at 19 was because we had to wait for him to turn 18 so we could get married. I know.
That's crazy.
I know. And my kids are 27 and 24. My son's, my youngest, almost 25. And I still couldn't imagine he can barely take care of himself. I can't possibly imagine him married. When I was his age, I was pregnant with him and already had my daughter. So yeah, I agree. Like that in that culture though, it's just, it's kind of celebrated. And I think, when you start looking at how that plays into what marriages end up looking like, the religions in and of themselves are pretty controlling over every detail of your life. And like you said, it's insidious. It's bit by bit, you accept certain things. And it really is this amazing setup for men in particular that have that same personality. Because as soon as you're married, my ex-husband relied on the religion to keep me in the marriage because he knew I wouldn't go against it. And he knew that he could be controlling. And it wasn't that I agreed with it or felt like I deserved it or any of those things, but it's kind of that you've made your bed, now you have to lie in it mentality. And so, you make these decisions when you're, like, in my case, start dating at 16 and then married at 19. And you're like, oh, I have to stick with this decision forever now. This is what I've done.
Right. Now, your ex-husband, he's now your ex-husband, came from an alcoholic and abusive family. And so you could even say, there are warning signs, although I came from an alcoholic and abusive family, and I've never beat my kids. I'm not an alcoholic. I've never been abusive. And so just because someone comes from a rocky background isn't indicative that they're going to be the same way, although there can be a higher likelihood of perpetuating that cycle. But I want to make clear, like you said, in that religion, these are very patriarchal religions.
Yes.
I don't in and of itself have an issue with the order of things or how God says he wants them done. I have a very big problem in the abuse of the patriarchal order. Yeah. And in a religion that's strict, yes, it snakes its way into your life, that abuse of patriarchal power, where you need to be kept in your place and he's the head of the household. And so he did come from that background, but he didn't necessarily. Did he perpetuate the cycle or did he end the cycle of abuse?
No, he definitely perpetuated it. And, what you say is so key, because when I think back on, were there signs, and from the standpoint that he came from that background, if as an adult now, a mature adult, I might look harder at somebody that came from that background. But in that situation and being so young, he spent a lot of time with my family, which my family was pretty mellow, and none of that abusiveness going on or anything. And so whenever he was with our family, he loved being with my family. And he loved that feeling. So I never saw that sort of behavior displayed toward me. Now, toward his own family, yes, like his whole family would get out of control, him included. But I thought that, well, then that's not going to transfer to me. Once we're married, he'll be out of that element. He'll be more in my family type element and we'll be fine. But literally within months of getting married, I knew it was a big mistake.
So again, I love that word insidious, because it's, I was in a relationship with somebody dating where I realized one day I had to ask permission to turn on the vacuum in case it might be disruptive. Okay, so when you make a statement like that, people are like appalled.
Yeah.
How could you be in it? Well, it didn't start that way. It didn't start like, hi, this is who I am. And by the way, these are the parameters of the relationship, so get used to them now. It really is little by little, step by step over time. And you wake up one day and you realize, holy crap, I can't even turn on a vacuum cleaner without asking permission.
Yeah.
So tell me your journey in that, because now you're an adult and you're married and you have children coming in pretty quickly, which is which is also one of those things where I think not only are strict religions not just promoting but encouraging very young marriages where you don't even know who you are yourself, but they're also encouraging procreation. And I'm sorry, I have kids. That's the hardest thing you're ever going to do. And the last thing that you should be doing if you're not ready for it. And here you are.
Yeah.
So how did that look? Take me through that journey.
It starts as, a lot of in your face, teeth clenched, yelling, poking at your shoulder. Then that kind of turns to pushing and shoving, and before you know it, you're got a toddler and you're pregnant, and your husband has his hands around your neck, and you're starting to lose consciousness, and he's saying, I hope you lose this baby so we have one less mouth to feed. It seems like it's a big step, but it's this one step at a time. And at the point in time when that had happened to me, and I had to call the police, and the police begged me to leave him, and I wanted to, but I was like, I literally, I was 25, could not see a way out of it. I really couldn't see a way out of it. I didn't work at that point in time. I was staying at home with my kids. I had a 2.5-year-old. I was, 3 months pregnant. And I knew I wouldn't have the support of my family or anybody else. And I felt stuck. And, it's funny because it used to drive me crazy when you'd watch Phil Donahue. Remember Phil Donahue? And, or Oprah, any of those shows, and they have people on there and people say, I just thought I deserved it. And I'm like, I never thought I deserved this kind of behavior, ever. And I used to tell them all the time, you cannot treat me like this. This isn't healthy for our kids to see. But I didn't feel like I had a way out. And I just literally couldn't figure out what I'm going to do with a baby and a toddler and no job and no community. I had literally no friends outside of that religious community. And I felt like I was stuck. And then there's the guilt factor. I don't want to let down family and God and everything else. So you try to figure out how you can make it work. And that's what you do.
At any point, did you discuss this with your family? Because even within a strict religion, there are certain things that are and are not okay, acceptable behavior. So within that community, that religious community that you had, your family and your friends, was there anyone that you could talk to? Was there anyone that supported you?
No. And at the point in time when things were really unraveling, and I was talking to the elders of our church, our congregation, and my parents were made aware of what was going on, my parents. Basically what they told me was they would give me examples of women who'd been beaten so badly repeatedly by their husbands that they landed in the hospital, and that they were long-suffering. Long-suffering is a huge catchphrase for Jehovah's Witnesses. I don't know about Mormons, but and it's supposed to be, that's like the end-all be-all. You want to be long-suffering. So they would talk about the long-suffering patience of these women, and how eventually, sometimes 20, 30 years would go by and their husbands would be won over and stop their abusive behavior. So and I knew that that's what I would be told, because I heard examples like that all the time. And I knew that if I came forward with what was happening to me, that was what they would say. And when I did go to them, that is what they said. So it's really, in fact, one elder in particular very much downplayed it, said I was just exaggerating. I'd never been to the hospital, so it couldn't be that bad. And just, they really, there's not a lot of support for that. Although they sort of pick and choose. There are some people that they stand up for, other people they don't. It just sort of depends on how things are presented. I'm a pretty direct person, and I don't tiptoe around or try to cast things in a certain light. I just tell it like it is. And so could I have presented myself in a certain manner? Possibly, where I would have gained more sympathy, I guess, but it wouldn't have been true compassion or empathy. And in the end, the real message would still be, you need to stay and try and figure it out.
Right. And there's also a lot of blame. I found, it's your fault that this has happened. Well, what could you do differently to stop this from happening? Which isn't just a religious way of thinking. A lot of just people in the community are wondering, well, what did she do to deserve this? And a lot of the way that women feel who are abused is, well, how could I have made it better? That's what we think. It doesn't matter if you're a child or an adult. When somebody's beating the living shit out of you, you're wondering, well, how did I play a part in this somehow? So there's a lot of self-blame, religion taken out of it.
Yeah.
So I'm sure we could hear from hundreds of women who have been through domestic violence, and the story is very, very similar regardless of the religious undertone, but that does make you feel even that much more alone. And this wasn't yesterday. There are programs now that there weren't back in the day.
Yeah.
Where women, if you have no one, there is still someone there. There are hotlines. We have internet on our phones now. It wasn't necessarily like that back then. So you really did feel much more alone. So you lasted how long in this relationship that was abusive pretty much from the beginning?
17 years, 18 by the time we were officially divorced. And it really just had gotten to this point where he was following me to and from work, calling me all day long, wanting me to quit my job as a fitness instructor because he didn't, was concerned about the element of people I was meeting at the gym. And we did seek outside the religion counseling. That's one thing I want to make sure is clear, because this isn't, as you said, it's not just a religious issue, but people that engage in domestic violence, whether it's physical violence, emotional, financial, that's a big issue for a lot of people. Some people sexual. I unfortunately didn't deal with that one aspect, but the verbal abuse, all of those things, it's very cyclical in nature. And, there's that honeymoon phase, and it starts to fall apart, and then they start to, there's a big blow up, and then it's back to that honeymoon phase. And the whole time you're like trying to adapt and be, should I be distant? Should I be more loving? Should I lay down the law? Like, you're trying everything as the victim to try to figure out how to not have this continually happen. And we did seek outside counseling several different times, but those people, it's very ingrained, and breaking that pattern is very challenging for them for a variety of reasons. So, the likelihood that they'll come out of it and it's going to be all good is not that high, unfortunately.
Well, and you're talking about the abuser, not.
Yes.
I think first with and I love therapy. I have no ill will towards therapy. The issue is that when you're working with a couple, I could be going by myself. If I'm not willing to recognize my issues and admit them and embrace them, and I don't have a willingness to change, it's not going to matter. You can smile and say the right things, but the actions have to follow suit. And anybody can change anything. I absolutely believe that 150%. If you admit it, embrace it, and you want to, and you're willing to do the level of work that it takes to make those changes. And that's difficult. And quite honestly, coming from an abusive background myself as a child, I imagine the abusers thinking, well, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Because if I'm going to stay and tolerate it, why change it? It's working great for him, right? So it wasn't until it wasn't working great anymore. So so you did therapy. Now, I do want to back up for just a second. At what point in there did you start getting involved in the fitness industry? You have this 18-year-long marriage. Where in there? And I can understand that was a pretty ballsy move on your part.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you. So when my son was just a few months old, I was at this point where I was staying at home with the kids, and I just wanted some little piece of outside life, basically, outside of being a stay-at-home mom and being encased in this religious community. And so I happened to have a friend who was also one of Jehovah's Witnesses, that was an aerobics instructor. And so she encouraged me to do that because there's on-site childcare, you get paid to work out, all of that stuff. So I decided to do it. And at that point in time, in order to become certified, it was like I had to take a college course for it. It was just a semester, but I had to take this semester-long course. And my ex-husband picked a fight with me every single night before I would have to leave, because it was twice a week, and really did everything, like sneering at what I wanted to do and just really put me down. And I was just like, I'm doing it. So I did it. So at that point, my son was just a few months old. My daughter was 3. And started teaching fitness classes and taught all the way through our marriage. In fact, I was planning on becoming a personal trainer, but I decided to get divorced instead. So, make some choices there.
The coin toss.
The coin toss, exactly. And things had just gotten so ramped up with my ex-husband, and I got to that point, the breaking point, and split. So I had to find like a full-time job instead. But so that whole time for quite a while it was really my lifeline in many ways. The physicality of it gave me a lot of not just physical strength, but mental strength. Having some touchstones of people that weren't all about the religion was critical, because at the point in time when I actually left, I had 3 friends, and they were all people that I knew from the gym, one of whom I'm married to now.
We're getting to that. We're getting there.
We'll get there.
But the thing about the fitness industry and being fit is, you're right. So you're physically stronger, you're mentally stronger. But I mean, it does this weird thing. You start to feel good about yourself. Mm-hmm. And when you're feeling crappy about yourself from everywhere else, then you want more of that. Feel good about yourself. So I mean, it's shocking that all of this lasted so long. You have this huge timeline, of all of these years of abuse and that battle within and the feeling like you can't get out. So you have these 3 friends, but how did you finally look at him and say, enough is enough and I'm leaving?
I had gotten to a point where, like I said, he was following me, calling me constantly, and we were seeing a therapist again. And we'd gone to the therapist. We'd gone there separately because he was coming from work. And the therapist just looked him dead in the face and said, she's already almost got 1 foot out the door. What are you going to do? What? And my husband just shrugged his shoulders, and he looked at me and he said, what would it take for you to stay? And I said, he'd have to be nice to me. That's it. That was my only requirement. And so we left the therapist's office, and my husband was full of promises. We're driving home. It's about a 15-minute drive home. And on the way, I know our dog needs food. So I get off the freeway, 1 exit before our house. He's on the phone. Where are you going? What are you doing? We just left the therapist's office, and he's still trying to track me. And I just said, I can't take this anymore. I found out he'd been lying to me about some stupid things. He, said that he was going to be buying this land and all this other stuff. It's kind of a long story, but it's just finding out about the lying, the nonstop, calling me. And then in this one instance, is like, that's when it just clicked to me, like, no matter what I do, this isn't going to change. It's never going to change. And at the time I was 35 or 6. So I could see 40 like looming in the distance. And for some reason, I kept thinking, if I don't change this by the time I'm 40, I'm never going to be able to change it. And so I suggested that we have a trial separation, which he actually agreed to. I was surprised. So he went and lived with his mother, and we were trading the kids back and forth. And he just came home after this had been going on for about a month that we were separated, because I was just trying to get some distance. And he just came over one day and said, that's it, I'm moving back in. And I had to get an order of protection against him. And at that point, I just said, it's never going to work. We're filing for divorce.
What was the worst? Now, you made a comment earlier about how, well, you never landed up in the hospital, so it couldn't be that.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's a good barometer for physical abuse, but
yeah.
What was the worst moment in the abuse history, or moments? How bad did it get?
The worst really was the point in time when I was pregnant with my son. Now, I stayed with him another 10 years after that, but when I was pregnant with him, because I'd had a miscarriage, and which was very devastating, and got pregnant. And at that point in time, when he was literally choking me to the point where I was losing consciousness and telling me that he hoped I lost that baby, that was because that was so directly to the kids. Everything else he did, he would clench his teeth, he would, get in their face and stuff, but he didn't ever physically beat them. Now, was he abusive and all of those other, verbally abusive? Yes, toward them. But for some reason, I was able to, in my mind, separate those things out. So that one, to me, was the worst because I felt like my child was threatened, my unborn child. That was the worst of physical. But it was, I think, near the end of our marriage, it was the lying that he was doing. I found out he had several people in collusion with him he was making up stories about me and spreading things around. He'd made up a fake email account in my name and then was emailing back and forth to populate this account with my supposed infidelities so that he could have a record to show people how bad I was. When I started finding some of these things out, I was shocked that someone would go to that length. And actually, I was slightly impressed that he had the intelligence to think that far ahead. But yeah, as we were nearing that end point, I was really starting to see that I didn't think he had the ability to change what he was doing. It just became, I tried every avenue I could think of, and it became clear it wasn't going to change.
So 18 years has gone by, and you're separated for that month, and then you say no, and you get a restraining order. And what happened with the church and with your family? Not his family as much, but your parents and your siblings.
Yeah, so I was out of touch with my brother because he was an alcoholic and was disfellowshipped as well. So he was not part of our family. One of my sisters never chose to follow the religion, so she stood by me through the whole thing. My other sister was pretty young at the time and didn't know there's a big age gap between me and my younger sisters. My parents they weren't happy about his behavior, but they didn't want me to divorce him. So they wouldn't help me at all in terms of actually divorcing him. They did help me a little bit in terms of looking after my kids while I was working. The church just really put the pressure on for me to get back together. They can, of course, my ex had been building up this whole log of crap to discredit my reputation. They wouldn't listen to anything I said. I found out that he was seeing somebody and all of this, and they just wouldn't even look into that stuff. Because they were hell-bent on pinning it on me. There had been 3 or 4 women over the previous year in our church who had left their husbands for another man. And so elder I was talking with said that he was going to make an example out of this situation. And so it didn't matter what the truth of the facts were to him. It was very important for him to see that this wasn't going to stand. So the people in our congregation were terrible. The day that he was to have his items removed from our house, by law, he wasn't allowed to be near me because I had this order of protection. But we had very distinct 6 people that were supposed to come and pick up his things. And the day that they arrived, the police came so that just to make sure he didn't show up. The entire congregation showed up at my house. Somebody came in. It was madness. There was like 40 people there at my house taking stuff. Much of it wasn't designated as his. One person disconnected the garage door so I couldn't close my garage door. They were going under my house. They were trying to go inside the house. And the police, who were only supposed to be there for about 15 minutes to make sure he didn't show up, stayed for the whole time because they said they'd never seen anything like it. They didn't know what these people were going to do to me. And they were like animals at that point. Nobody ever asked me my side of the story. Nobody, and these were people I'd known, keep in mind, my whole life. These were people that I had a solid reputation with, and his reputation was one of a exaggerator at best, liar at worst, and they knew that about him, but they still accepted the story as it was presented and completely turned on me.
What about the kids in all of this?
Yeah.
How old were they then? 15?
No, my daughter was 13. My son was 10. And unknown to me, all of these things that my husband was using to try to discredit my reputation, he was also showing to our 13-year-old daughter. So he'd been telling her that I was cheating on him, and just all kinds of stuff. So she was obviously very upset. This is not the kind of information a 13-year-old, even if it was true, should not be shared with her. Our son, he had no interest in gaining custody over because he was 10, he has ADD, he's not the easiest person in the world to deal with, so he didn't share any of this with our son. But our daughter, just eventually, it got so bad that she was starting to exhibit the same abusive behavior towards her brother while I was at work. And she kept saying, I want to go live with Dad. And so finally I relented after months of this, thinking that she would remember what it was like to live with him. But unfortunately, because the church backed up his story, and there was a lot of, your mom's so terrible, that relationship was completely deteriorated and remains deteriorated to this day. She still lives with her dad. She's 27, still lives at home, still involved in that religion. So my son, completely opposite, left the religion, stayed with me, and moved on with his life along with me.
So one of the things that you and I talked about before is that, and I'm going to quote you, you said, I did everything wrong while facing my challenges. What makes you feel like you did anything wrong?
It's not that I feel like I did anything wrong in terms of deciding to leave, but what I did is I did not prepare in advance. I could see the writing on the wall, and I kept hoping against hope that things would change. And I really feel like it's important for people to accept what reality they're presented with, so that they can then say, this is probably not going to work. Let me make some kind of preparations so that I don't just have to completely jump with no net. And that's unfortunately, I just jumped with no net. I didn't have any support. I didn't know anything about divorce. I didn't know what it looked like. The internet was relatively new. So I literally picked a lawyer out of the yellow pages. I let my lawyer handle all of it for me, and she wasn't a good attorney, as I understand now and as I began to understand. I didn't ask people for help. I tried to do everything on my own because I've always been a real, I can pull myself up by my own bootstraps kind of person. And that's not bad. But, and none of those things are necessarily bad, but there's such a much better way to do things. And I had to really learn how to ask people for help when I needed help, or accept help when it was offered. And I had to learn how, later, to be much more of an advocate for myself. So, with my attorney and with the courts and all of those things, I let a lot of other people take the reins because I didn't know what to do or how to do it. So it's, that's really when I talk about doing everything wrong, it's really about trying to be too self-reliant, and not sort of preparing for what was coming. So I really had to make some drastic decisions instead of more gradual decisions.
And that is a great segue. So you knew your husband beforehand through the fitness industry, and you climbed the corporate ladder in the fitness industry. You started coaching. Tell me about meeting, because he's your husband now.
Yeah.
So you knew him with just a couple people. He was one of a couple people that you knew.
Yeah.
Going through all of this. So you did remarry.
I did remarry. Shocking, I know. When I first started thinking about divorce, I thought, oh man, I don't ever want to get married again. But sometimes when the right person comes along, and the interesting thing about my husband that I'm married to now is that when I met him, it was while all of this stuff was going on. And he, coming from, he grew up in Utah, surrounded by Mormons as a Catholic,
I'm so sorry. Tell him I'm sorry.
I know. So such a tricky situation, right? He's not a practicing Catholic any longer, but anyway, so he had gone to college as a sociology major, and part of his internship was working with women victims of domestic violence. And so I just knew him casually, as I did other people at the gym, but he could sense that there was more going on. And so as things progressed, he actually ended up moving to Atlanta, but continued to stay in touch with me because he was concerned about the situation. And so he really actually provided a lot of support for me through that situation, just as a friend. He didn't even live, he was on the other side of the country, but was very integral in me being able to move through that situation. And then as time progressed, I had to, once my divorce was finalized, I had to leave the state. I'd been in that city, in that area for my entire life. I couldn't go anywhere without running into people from my religion, number one. Number two, I was scared all the time. I slept about 3 or 4 hours a night for 2 years while I was going through my divorce. I was a basket case, and I just had to put distance between me and my ex-husband and my whole life so I could truly start over. And so I moved to Northern California, and at that point in time, my current husband also relocated to Northern California for a job, and that's when we started dating and ended up getting married.
Yay.
I know, it's kind of a weird story.
Well, yeah, but it's a good story because it wasn't, there was no orchestration behind any of it. And he got to see you at your worst right out of the gate.
Yeah, it's not the truth. And the other thing, and I really stress this to my own clients, is that I don't necessarily think that getting involved in a relationship as soon on the heels of your divorce or in the midst of your divorce is the best thing to do. because you have to do a lot of healing. What was actually really helpful for me, and why I think I'm going on 11 years in this marriage now, was the fact that we didn't live in the same state. Most of our communication was on the phone. And we were friends. This was more about being friends than anything else. And it wasn't until my divorce was, had behind me, and, I had rebuilt my life before we even began dating. And we dated for a couple of years before we got married. So, yes, I met him while I was going through all of that, but the real relationship build up was sometime later.
Right. Now, you moved locations and you climbed the corporate ladder in the fitness industry. So you stayed in that.
Mm-hmm.
And then now it's 2013 that you started your own business. So how much time had elapsed from your divorce until 2013? When was your divorce final?
When was my divorce final? 2003? 2003, I think, is when it was final. So 10 years, a little more than 10 years had lapsed. Yeah.
So you have 10 years under your belt. You're working in the fitness industry and part of that we've talked about, people do a lot of different things in order to heal and to get through no matter what the situation is. Some people use religion, some people use music, some people use therapy, sometimes a combination of a lot of stuff. And a lot of us that talk about things on the back end of coming through situations is the physical outlet.
Yeah.
And that was the same for you.
Mm-hmm.
That mental, emotional well-being, stability. Yeah. So you maintained that through everything. And then you started your own business, and you are a divorce coach.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Which is amazing. So you're called, your website is the divorcestrategist.com.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the same as Facebook, and Instagram is Laura the Divorce Strategist. But basically you can find you anywhere. The Divorce Strategist is how you find you through this. So this is way back in 2013 now. You've had 10 years and you went through your own experience, and you are a coach for fitness. You're still doing all of that. And then I love your approach to divorce coaching. And I don't think I have your email in front of me, the emails that we went back and forth, but I think it's actually on your website, your approach to divorce coaching. It must have been on your website. You talk about how you don't always feel that divorce is the answer, but it's also not a failure. So go into, how did this come about?
The business?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's funny because, and I never wanted to be the poster child for divorce, but because my experience was fairly, shall we say, extreme, and there are a number of people that saw me go through that, and especially in the fitness industry. And I have to say, I just have to back up for 1 second. While I was going through that, people thought surely I would give up teaching my classes. And there were days I would be sobbing in my car and then just wipe the tears away, go in and teach a class. But it was the one place where people still liked me, where people would say, you're doing a great job. And it was a place for me to hold on to just that shred of who my core self was. And that's sort of what carried me through. And so as a result, I would often share my experience of divorce with people in my classes. If they approach me, I don't, start up my class and then start diving into my personal life, but they were aware of what was going on. And so I always was sort of casually helping people through some, just giving them pointers. I really am not an advocate for divorce. I'm a big believer in marriage. As I said, I've been remarried for a long time now. But sometimes divorce is necessary to live your best life. So I believe in that too. And I believe in helping people. And so in 2013, my company had asked me to move to Southern California, which I did, to support the business. And then the business got sold. And as a result of the business getting sold, a lot of the corporate level employees were laid off. So I was sort of like, what do I do with myself now? And that's when the seed for my business was sort of planted. I initially was sort of focused just on personal development, but because of my own experience, of course, you draw the people to you that most can benefit from your own, situation and experience. So that was what I kept drawing. So I just sort of, threw up my hands and said, I give up. Yes, I'll focus on divorce. And started really focusing on that. And my approach is really about being practical. How do you connect with the people you need to connect with and keep your sanity from beginning to end, so that when your divorce is over, because it's not fun for anybody, it's not an enjoyable experience, even if it's amicable, it's still sort of the death of the dream that you had when you got married. But it is an opportunity to start to live a better life if you can hook into that mentally and emotionally. And that can be tough. So that's kind of why I got into it and why I'm so super passionate about it, because I know people, I've seen people who've been divorced for 30 years and they're still in agony from it because they didn't take time to take care of themselves and set themselves up. I'm sure you see this with your clients as well. When people fail to really reach out for their future, all they're left with is their past. And so it just holds them in this place where they have no power, they have no happiness or joy. And I don't want divorce to do that to people. So that's kind of how I got into what I'm doing.
And I think that that's true. If I had, even in college, I was 17 when I went to college. And even if I think back, I still, you realize when you look back, you're constantly being guided in specific directions because of your experience or because of what you attract. And it's easier to just say, okay, I'm going to go with it. And people don't realize that they're being held hostage by that past. And you're right. You don't think about the future or make plans for that because you're hostage of your past, and that you have the ability to not be hostage of your past. And sometimes you just don't know because you don't know. And sometimes you don't know to ask the right questions. And I mean, there's a million reasons. And the things that you did is that you did a lot of personal development, which I love, because we have very parallel thought processes and paths on this. The reading, the learning to rely on others. Oh my God.
Yeah.
What? Someone asked me once, are you good at everything you do? And I said, yes, because I don't do the things I'm not good at. I find somebody who is, and I call them a resource.
Yes.
No, like, why do you want to be good at everything? You can't possibly. Yeah. But going, nope, I'm not good at that, but you are, so can you help me? That's a very hard thing for people to do. And do it a couple of times. You'll never go back to not doing it. Mm-hmm. You've done meditation, all of the physical fitness industry, the classes that you've taught, and you ended up publishing a book. Divorce is a push-up, get strong to get through. And now in your business, you do the one-on-one coaching and e-course, and you tie in, which I do also. We do it in different ways, which is exciting. The physical aspect, the yoga or the meditation, into getting through things. And I do the same type of thing in a slightly different way. And so I love that. And now your website, you publish weekly blogs. I saw the one that, I think it's the one that just came out. Tell me what the most recent was that just came. It was like something about I want to strangle my ex, or
revenge. Revenge. Because I hear that all the time. And what's really funny is that as important as support is, and it's nice to have, sort of that misery loves company thing, so you can commiserate with people, but they aren't necessarily your best resource for advice, because what ends up happening is you hear people saying, take his shit and throw it on the lawn, sell it, this, and yeah, that plays into like, you want to just, you're so wrapped up in that. But 5 years from now, you is going to be really pissed if you do that.
And I think
that's who you are as a person all the time, you know, but overall, that's not who most of us are.
And if it is who you are as a person all the time, you really can't say too much about the other person.
Right.
And, you know, the Misery Loves Company, I have a great example that everybody can relate to. I bought a Kia car. I'd never heard of a Kia before. I'd never seen one. They're everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't know they were everywhere till I bought one, and it was no longer in my periphery. Now I know what a Kia is. I know what this car looks like, and I see them everywhere. Oh my, all of a sudden I'm not a trendsetter. I didn't buy a Kia and everybody saw me driving down the road going, oh, we've got to get us one of those. They were there before. So you notice where you are at. And what I mean about that, like you said, misery loves company. If where you are at is misery, every quote, every social media post, everything you see everywhere, every comment is going to be geared towards that misery, the revenge, however you're feeling.
Yeah.
It's a matter of shifting your attitude or opening up to see other things. There were always that many Kias on the road. I just wasn't aware of them. And so as people, we need to open up and be aware of the other things that are surrounding us, because there are equally as many positive things as there are negative, but it's a matter of raising our own awareness to that.
Yeah.
So you notice where you live, where you live in your head. So you have, your website is fantastic. You do weekly blogs. You do have a lot of freebies and tips and tricks and lots of ways that if people want to go on, and it's not even divorce right now. It could be divorce in like you said, 30 years.
Yeah.
If there are struggles, you can still heal from stuff that was 10 years ago as opposed to a month ago.
Yeah.
You have all of that. It's incredible. A monthly newsletter. You are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And so your worst place, let me see if I can sum this up accurately, was losing your family, your religion, your marriage, your identity.
Yeah.
Extracting yourself from a domestic violence relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And starting over. And what is your best place?
Oh gosh, I think I'm in it and moving toward it, because things just keep getting better and better, honestly. It felt really good when I made those changes, and it was terrifying and felt good to stand on my own 2 feet. But it's been really amazing to see myself continue to push myself through things and to continue to move forward and to acknowledge things about myself. That's why I think the personal development is so important. And there's a company down here that I regularly take their workshops about every 4 months or so, or 3 months or so, because I have to constantly look at myself so that I can understand what I'm doing on an unconscious level, and then keep being able to move myself forward. And instead of trying to bootstrap my way through my life like I used to, now I can do it with a lot more thoughtfulness, intelligence, understanding. And so I really feel like the best is now, because I feel like I'm much more of a whole person. I get to use all of what I think. When I moved to Orange County and I lost my job, I was in this unique position again where I had to make friends, I wasn't a mom with little kids, so I didn't have any built-in community there. I was not part of a religious community, so nothing there, not part of a work. I had to actually find friends at 40-something years old. And so I made this conscious effort to really find people that 100% were on board with who I am at this moment as I evolve. And I've met some of the most incredible, amazing people. I have truly supportive, loving, caring people in my life that they don't care if I mess up. They don't care if one day I think I'm this and the next day they think I'm that. They just want me to be happy. And having that in my life is such an incredible gift. Anybody that doesn't have that wants that. People that have that already may think, I don't know, what's the big deal? But believe me, that is a big deal for many, many people to get to walk around being you instead of wearing some sort of a mask. So I think now is good.
I love it. And your dream, tell me about your dreams.
Well, so I'm in the process of developing an e-course and a yoga series for healing from divorce. So I'm really excited about that. My ultimate dream is really to be able to do some, like 5 to 7 day retreats that are really geared towards, acknowledging where you are, the hurt that you went through, because a lot of times we try to pretend that doesn't exist and skip over it, which doesn't work. So acknowledge it, embrace it, honor it, and then let it go. And that's really what I want to do is come together and bring all these elements of things that I do, that I've learned, that I've experienced together to, educate people, to spend a little time understanding how we work so that we can, honor who we are and learn how to let it go and fold in some real nurturing self-care and disconnection from outside life for a little while. So that's kind of my ultimate goal, is to get to those retreats, 2 or 3 times a year where you can really build a strong community and take care of yourself so you can take care of all your other stuff.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. And I want to thank you, Laura. Again, it's Laura Aiello, Aiello, at thedivorcestrategist.com. And I look forward to sharing this. Hopefully we have a lot of input from women who sometimes we just need to hear it from somebody else to be brave enough to talk about it. And hopefully that's what this did. Domestic violence statistically it's staggering. And so I appreciate you being vocal about your journey. So hopefully other people are less afraid of their own journey. And so I appreciate you.
Thank you so much. It was my pleasure to be on and chat today. It's always so good to find a kindred spirit.
That is amen to that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening in to Jen Taylor Rerouting. Like, share, and of course, comment. I welcome input with attitude. Get a copy of my book on Amazon, Hello, My Name is Warrior Princess, or check out my website, jentaylor.net. And if you still want more, sign up for one of my coaching packages.